the nature of the event.
Okay.
Could it be the same for Montreal? Because Montreal was mentioned as well.
Again, I have the same answer, yes.
Any chance it's a sporting event?
A good chance it's a sporting event. It has something to do with hockey.
But any chance it's an actual game?
A lot of things, different things are being considered and looked into, I guess, is what I say. Yeah.
What's the feeling, though? Because obviously it's been mentioned that Montreal was the place where the league was actually created. You know, how much is the league value having?
Very much. I mean, I think that's certainly the goal and the intention when we go about sitting down and planning is looking for meaningful events that have some connection with our history and the 100 years. So, you know, Montreal is obviously a logical place, Ottawa's a logical place, and Toronto's a logical place.
So how did the process work with bringing Gretzky in and welcoming him back to the NHL?
Well, I mean, I don't think we ever viewed him as being gone from the NHL and the NHL family, and you know, we've had Wayne's been fantastic to us and the league over time, and he's been a tremendous ambassador. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure I've ever seen a better ambassador for our game and for our league. And you know, clearly one of the best players of all time, and is just a perfect fit. We thought it was a perfect fit from the start, and explored it with him. He was looking at a number of things, and ultimately, you know, we agreed that this would be a great thing for the game, and particularly during the centennial season.
What does the role entail, essentially?
Well, I mean, it's a more formalized ambassadorship than he normally does. You know, because wherever Wayne goes, he's asked questions about, you know, the state of the game and the state of the NHL, and you know, that's one thing about Wayne. He's always so positive and always kind of says the right thing. And this is just kind of us coming together more kind of officially to kind of do a lot of the same things.
So he'll be at various events
Correct.
throughout the year. And is it his choosing, or is it sort of like a cross between the league?
Yeah,
and
it's us sitting down and figuring out what makes the most sense together. So a large part of it will be his choosing, but it's, you know, obviously around the events that we're going to build for this celebration.
Bill, a couple of young players, not one player, Connor McDavid, he said that you know, he would prefer to play for Team Canada in the next World Cup, even if he's under 23. How do you react to that? A comment like that, would it put in jeopardy the return of a team like that if players, you know, are not?
No, I certainly understand where he's coming from. We haven't even, you know, we want to get this tournament concluded successfully before we kind of sit down and talk about what the future looks like. But I certainly understand that comment, and you know, we had never looked far enough to address what the rule would be in that kind of circumstance. So I'm not even sure it's inconsistent with how we would approach that. So you know, haven't given it more thought than that.
Bill, has anything in this tournament made you rethink maybe going back to a all-national team format for 2020?
Well, I don't think any decision had been made one way or the other. I think we certainly said that kind of one of the things we were considering, and one of the reasons we had the format we did have, was not having the opportunity to have a qualification event to kind of let teams select kind of the last two spots. But I think, you know, I think the fact that Team Europe has succeeded as well as it has, and Team North America was as successful as it was, really is a validation that you know, one of the objectives we were seeking in creating the concept was the most competitive tournament ever. And I think, you know, Team Europe being in the final certainly is a validation of the concept behind what we designed at a minimum, and we'll see where we go from that, you know, when we think about it.
But players from Team Europe, though, have repeated that they probably have much more pride representing their own country instead of something that might have no future. Does that change anything at all in what the league might do?
No, not really, because I mean those same players would tell you, and I have no doubt they do. And you know, we talked at various points about an anthem for Team Europe, and you know, it was their viewpoint that you know, an anthem, you have to feel passion for, you know, a national pride, and you know, to create an anthem, potentially you don't have that passion. Having said that, the players would also tell you that you know that they enjoy having the opportunity to participate in this tournament, and many of them realize that in the absence of this format, they'd have no opportunity to participate. So I think there's, you know, that's a balance, and I would say most of Team Europe, if you ask them, I think would endorse the current format as being better than the alternative.
Is the popularity of Team North America, who only played 3 games here, what you expected?
Probably exceeded my expectations. I mean, I think the team played fabulously well. I think it was well selected, well coached, and the players were magnificent. So I think, you know, the way the team and the players captured kind of the hearts and imagination of the fans, and really kind of became the tournament darling. Is probably something that nobody could have anticipated, certainly to the extent that it happened.
Bill, any thought of moving the time of the game? Because in Europe, the final will be at 2 in the morning. I guess that the ratings won't be very, very good there. So it's basically scheduled for Canada and the USA, and the USA is not there. So isn't that
Well, I mean, I think it would be a challenge. I mean, look, I think you always have that challenge when you have an international tournament. Even, you know, when you're in Europe, you have the opposite challenge, right? And it doesn't mean you change the start time of the games. The fact that the final games, at least on Tuesday and Thursday, or at least the first 2 games are on weekdays, makes it even a greater challenge to address the time issue. Again, I think when we originally designed the tournament, you know, you have to give consideration also to the kind of the local rights holders, and that would be true if the games were in Russia as much as if they're in Canada. So, you know, those are all considerations. The European broadcasters, and you know, we're broadcasting I think 208 countries for this tournament. They understood what the limitations were and the difficulties from a time zone perspective going in. It's just one of those things that you have to deal with, I think.
Bill, Renee Fassel today pegged the odds at 50-50 of you guys going to Pyeongchang. Is that consistent with how you view it, or?
Well, what I'd say, I'm not going to handicap it, but what I'd say is I think time is very short to make a decision, and I'm not sure there's been a lot of progress made in the past 6 months, and I'm not sure there's any prospect of progress being made. So on the basis of that, I would say, you know, I'm more negative today than I was 2 weeks ago.
Well, in that sense, Bill, Gary talked about using this tournament to sort of, you know, as a promotion for the game and keeping it around. What approach do you take with the owners then? Because their enthusiasm for the Olympics is, how do you convince them that this is it financially good for them, or how do you go about that?
Well, certainly, you know, the commercial opportunity here is greater for our league and our owners than the Olympic opportunity has been historically. Having said that, in the entire scheme of things, it's a relatively minor commercial opportunity, right? So we do this tournament. The reason you do this tournament is much longer term, bigger picture than it is a 2-week point in time in Toronto. It's building a foundation for kind of international growth, both from a fan standpoint, but a commercial standpoint. But it's a much medium to long term vision as opposed to kind of what we're doing here and now.
But do you see a problem like convincing, say, an individual owner that, well, okay, a relatively small financial thing is worth risking, say, a Sidney Crosby, you know, an injury to him?
Well, that's one of the considerations you have to take into account, and to the credit of our board, as you mentioned, this is a little bit better than the Olympics because it's our commercial opportunity, not the IOC's. But in the entire scheme of things, it's, on a club by club basis, it's not a major commercial opportunity, at least at this point. So really the equation is it going to help grow the business longer-term international basis, and that's one of the things that'll be assessed after this tournament.
But aren't the Olympic Games a perfect stage for that to grow on an international basis?
Well, I mean, you've heard us say it before. I mean, in terms of metrics and tangible metrics, the Olympic participation really hasn't done a whole lot for the National Hockey League and for the clubs. It's obviously a big global stage, and probably the top global stage, but it hasn't translated to our business.
Did you
What
hold
has happened or not happened the last 2 weeks to make you more pessimistic or optimistic?
Well, we got an update from the International Ice Hockey Federation as to their most recent conversations with the IOC, and it doesn't seem as if there's been much progress made in terms of
Insurance costs and travel?
the elements that we typically have.
Do you still expect a decision in December, or is it looking like earlier?
I'm certainly hoping in the November-December timeframe. I might be a little more manic on that issue than others, because we have a schedule to create for 17-18, and that changes a lot depending on whether we go to the Olympics. And our clubs are looking for certainty with respect to when to schedule their preseason games. We got to know how to schedule the regular season. So the urgency for me is a little higher than it might be for others.
Bill, you talked a little bit about the commercial impact has been minimal with the Olympics. Okay, Korea is one thing. What about when you look past that to China, because that's a big untapped market where hockey seems to be a lot of potential there.
Yeah, it could be. There's no doubt. I think we've been very open with respect to the fact that when the IOC awarded the Beijing Games, it certainly created a bigger opportunity than we thought existed potentially before. But it also is possible that you don't go to one Olympics and you do go to the other. I don't think anybody has ruled that out as a possibility. So we'll kind of see how it plays out.
Bill, in other major sport events like the World Cup of Soccer, the procedure to establish the groups of the participating nations is a public lottery event. Here, the NHL sent out a press release, here are the groups, here's the schedule. Why was that process not public, and how do you think it affects the credibility of the tournament?
It's a fair question. I mean, I think it's historical to a certain extent. This has always been an invitational tournament. It's always been set up by the NHL and the NHLPA. That having been said, we didn't do that in a vacuum. We did that with the consultation and participation of the member countries. So we actually liked what we ended up creating, both schedule-wise and pool-wise. Having said that, that's not set in stone going forward either. A lot of things will be reevaluated, and I'm sure we'll continue to make tweaks and changes as we go forward.
Do you see the